Hello, trumpet players. I want to talk to you today about the power of 52 weekly lessons per year. So I figured this stuff out. Pardon my voice, I'm getting over losing my voice. I figured this stuff out the hard way. I was a teacher in El Paso before I moved to Houston. In El Paso, we weren't allowed to teach lessons in the schools, and to my knowledge, it's still like that now. When I was in El Paso, this is in the 80s, we either taught at the music store or they could come and take lessons from us at the university. I was a student at UTEP at the time. That's the University of Texas at El Paso. And most of my students met me at the university. And then sometimes they would come out to the music store and we would get a lesson there. And I never had more than about 15 students there, and yet I had all-state students. Never more than one at a time, but I did have all-state students. And I thought, when I left El Paso, I thought, here I'm going to Houston where they have lessons in the schools. And you can teach a lot more than just 15 students. And I thought that how wonderful that is, right? You're going, we're always thinking the grass is greener. And that's one of the things that I thought was going to be greener grass. In coming from El Paso, that's kind of funny, right? Because there's no green grass in El Paso most of the time. But so anyway, well, that's one of the things I noticed when I moved to Houston is how green everything is. But that's a tangent. Anyway, so when I came to Houston, I thought it was going to be better because you could teach in the schools. So the first year rolls around, no all-state students. Second year rolls around, no all-state students. Third year, no all-state students. This went on for years. My students were barely even making region. And, I'm really scratching my head thinking maybe, it's easy to think this way, right? It's easy to think that, well, maybe in El Paso, the competition is much lower. So it's easier to get students into all-state or whatever because, the state stuff is divided into areas. Maybe the El Paso stuff is just so much easier to get that to happen. And I was thinking stuff like that, like trying to explain it because nothing made sense. And then I get this call from one of the local band directors. He heard that I live in this apartment complex, and it just so happens that one of his students lives in that same apartment complex. In fact, that student's father was like the maintenance man for the apartment complex. And so he asked, could I teach this student? And I said, sure. Within the first year of him taking lessons at the apartment, he made all-state. And, you start scratching your head. You're like, well, how is that possible? Right? So I was encouraged to start teaching more outside of the schools. And it wasn't that every student I taught outside of the schools made all-state, but the ratio of all-state students became closer to what I was experiencing in El Paso. So like 1 out of 15 students was making all-state. And by the way, I don't put that much into Allstate. So don't misunderstand. I only use the Allstate thing because it's a better way to explain the results. Because people do actually think about Allstate, and it is a kind of sort of way to look at, um, instead of looking at the success of the individual, looking at the success of the teacher. So I'm not saying that Allstate is that big of a deal when I say this. I'm just using it as an example. And but this is not just about Allstate. The students I was teaching outside of the schools were getting better results. And the more I saw this success on the now, do you know what? Before I move on, and this is something I didn't say in the blog. The way I'm doing these things now, I write the blog first, and then I use that as an outline to talk about in the video. One thing I didn't mention in the blog is that I did have some great students through the schools. The one that comes to mind right now, and there were others too, but the reason I remember him now is because he took lessons again later. But there's a trumpet player in the indie band scene named Eric Jackson. He's with Spain Colored Orange. He was my student when he was in high school. And he never made All-State. If I'm not mistaken, well, I'm not going to go into that, but he was a great student. And I enjoyed teaching him. So don't misinterpret what I'm saying as saying all the students in the schools are bad. That's not what I'm saying. I'm talking about what's best for the student. Okay? So looking at spending more time teaching outside of the schools and having that data going through my head constantly. Sorry. I'm starting to piece things together. And for a while I was doing both. I think it was for about 3 years I was teaching in the schools and then teaching independently at the same time. And then at one point I had to just stop doing the schools because the difference was amazing. And I didn't want to be part of that anymore. I just didn't want to be part of that. I like when the students get so much more out of the lessons. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let's talk about what the difference is. Okay? What is the difference between lessons in the schools and lessons outside of the schools? The biggest difference is the time that they get to spend with the teacher. Now what I'm about to tell you is worst case scenario, okay? But it's not that far off from what's normal. In the schools, if they're taking lessons during class, they're lucky to get 25 minutes. Usually it's closer to 20 minutes of lessons. They're lucky to get 20 minutes, 25 minutes. Usually more like 20, okay? And that's because they have to be in and out quick enough to get to and from class. In some schools, you might have exceptions, like if their band class is an hour and a half long, I think, but I rarely ever had schools like that. The schools that I went to were less than an hour long. And if you're going to cram 2 students into that, they're hardly ever getting more than 20 minutes. And, I've been teaching the way I am now for 20 years now. I can't imagine a 20-minute lesson. I can't even imagine it. And then make it worse. right? The lessons get canceled for any reason, and they don't get made up. The lessons get canceled. So if there's an assembly, no lesson. If there's testing, no lessons. If there's a big concert coming up and the band directors want the students in the rehearsal, no lesson. They have, instead of coming up with reasons to have the lesson, they're more active trying to find reasons not to have the lesson. And I'm not exaggerating. Those students are fortunate if they get more than 20 lessons a year. They're fortunate if they get 20 lessons a year. Now, it might be a little bit better if they take lessons after school, okay? But not much better, okay? Let that sink in. And some of them might take lessons during the summer. Maybe. Now, we're going to do the math, but we're looking at worst case scenario, okay? Worst case scenario, you get 20 lessons, 20 lessons at 20 minutes each. That's almost 7 hours of lesson time for the whole year. Compare that to the students that take lessons outside of the schools. You know, I pushed for a long time that the more enthusiastic students should, through a program that we had, should take 52 lessons a year. If they could commit to 52 lessons a year, then we would give them special treatment. Because not because we wanted that money, but because we saw the results. We saw what kind of difference it made when the students spend 52 hours a year with their teacher. And think about that. That's 8 times as much lesson time. 8 times as much. Of course, you're going to get better results in your practice time, in your effort as a trumpet player. Of course, you're going to get better results if you spend more time in the lessons. And I think what we're talking about is an agent of socialization. Okay? I took sociology and I never stopped reading the stuff in college. I took it in college, never stopped reading it outside of college. Okay? And they talk about in sociology that proximity is an agent of socialization. So, in other words, the more time you spend with somebody or in a group, the more that culture that person is part of becomes your culture. And I've seen this with my students, right? I've seen it with the ones who commit to this. There have been many that things like when they graduate, they'll bring me a gift. Right? It should be the other way around, but they'll bring me a gift when they graduate because they've been taking lessons with me since they were in 7th grade. Or, yeah, you see what I mean? 7th grade, 8th grade, sometimes 6th grade, right? So that's 7 years of 52 lessons a year. They've got more time with me than any other teacher in their whole lifetime. Of course, my culture is going to rub off on them, right? And what I mean by culture, I'm talking about musically speaking. And I think that's what's happening. It's not about getting the right information and stuff like that. It's about being connected to somebody that actually knows what they're doing. And having it's almost like trumpet lesson osmosis, right? The 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 time that you spend together. And you know what? When you spend that much time with somebody on a weekly basis, you know that the teachers going through ups and downs in life, the students going through ups and downs in life, but we come together on a weekly basis, and there's the lessons, and it works both ways, by the way. The lessons work as a uh, an anchor for both of them. So there's something amazing that happens. So yes, it's not. So they'll bring me a gift at the end of their when they graduate because it's a parting gift, right? Because they know they're not going to be taking lessons anymore, and and it's hit them. This person they came to every week for 7 years is no longer gonna be a part of their weekly life, and it's starting to become a reality to them. Imagine how different those students are going to play the trumpet. They are part of this music culture now. Um, so yes, we still learn the details in the lesson, and there is what I am talking about is that there is more of that too. There's when you have 52 hours a year to talk about how to practice, to talk about what to do in performance. That is also better, but it's more than just that. That connection that you have because of the time that we spend is a powerful musical osmosis that the students absorb stuff musically from you that can't be articulated with words. It's a socialization thing. So yes, there is extreme value. It's powerful when you spend that kind of time with someone who is not only a good teacher, so that there's that communication, but also does this for a living. You know, so you're actually, by doing the 52-hour thing, you're actually benefiting from that person's, in this case me, benefiting from my experience as a performer. You're getting that experience without having to actually be part of that experience. And you know, I'm not suggesting that everybody has to do this. This is not, I wrote in the blog, I actually quite enjoy working with students that are not as ambitious and enthusiastic. I actually do enjoy working with those students. This is not about that. It's never been about trying to get more money from all you people, right? That's never been what it's been about. If you come to me and you say, these are the things I desire. I want to make all state. I want to be first chair. I want to be a professional musician. You tell me all this, and then you come to like one lesson a month, two lessons a month. Those two things are not consistent. I don't mind teaching somebody one or two lessons a month. Like I said, I quite enjoy it. The lessons are more enjoyable. okay, because it's less serious. You know, I tell students if they want to be a professional musician, I tell them we have to be serious in these lessons because your ability to feed your family and pay the rent and pay the light bill is influenced by what we do now in this time. Right? That's serious. And I will not take that lightly. So you tell me, if you tell me that you have these great ambitions, but then you don't show up to your lessons, that's a problem. That's a serious problem. That's why we're talking about this. Okay? There's you cannot compare. And you know what? Sometimes, and this is just the suspicious part of me, right? I'm not famous, but I am well regarded, highly regarded, right? I'm not famous, but I'm highly regarded, okay? And sometimes I get the feeling that people are taking lessons with me because they think that somehow by being connected to me, who I am, will help them more socially. Like they can go around and say, oh, I study with so-and-so, right? Um, I don't buy that. Yeah, how often do people? Okay, well, I guess I'm just thinking about me, right? If someone comes up to me and said, I studied with so and so, you know how many times I've heard someone say, I studied with so and it was some famous musician, but the guy that's telling me this is horrible? It's happened to me too many times. I don't even now um, listen. I don't even care anymore who you studied with. And I guess now, because of that, it kind of offends me. And in fact, it happened recently, right? I heard through the grapevine that someone who only took one lesson is going around telling people that he studied with me. Now, I don't mind teaching just the one lesson. That's okay. So, but anyway, yeah, I do think that sometimes that's why people take lessons, or they're trying to get that that leg up by being in the know and being able to walk into a group of people and say, yeah, well, I studied with Eddie Lewis. Um, like that's going to help you somehow, right? The way that studying with someone who's a good teacher helps you is by helping you become a better player. My wife was just um, reading something to me yesterday about people's talents and their strengths and stuff like that. And they were talking about university, and they were saying that in all the studies that they've done, that if you go to a university because of the name and the connection and stuff like that, those people end up being less successful than the people who went to a less connected university but got a better education. And this is the same thing as what I'm talking about now. You don't go to the lesson for that connection. You go to the lesson so that for that other connection, that connection where you start to absorb. That's why I like in this context, I like the word osmosis, right? Because you start absorbing experiences and abilities and stuff from your teacher that couldn't possibly be communicated in writing, couldn't possibly be communicated like this in a video, can't even be communicated verbally in the lessons. It's a holistic experience. So it's so, and you know, the reason why I'm talking about this is because right now we're going through a change in the studio to to do to change our pricing policies. We got rid of all the packages. And what happened? I want to explain this. What happened was I was trying to in my package system, I was trying to reward and encourage the students who committed to more lessons. And I think two things happened as a result. I think first, people thought that I was trying to get more money out of them. And you know what? How you could ever believe that about me? That's, I won't even go there. If I was so much into the money that I would do something like that, I wouldn't be teaching trumpet lessons, right? If that was the kind of person I was, I'd be doing something entirely different. Okay? So no. But the other thing was, I think some people saw it as an honor instead of thinking of it, and I figured out what was wrong. I'm not going to go into the details of it, but yeah, we're changing now to a system that doesn't reward people to commit to the 52 weeks or to longer lessons for a longer period of time. And so this is what's prompting me to talk about this now, is because that's my biggest concern with this new pricing change, is that people are going to not take the weekly thing seriously anymore, and I hope that doesn't happen. Not because of the income. It looks like we're getting a new inflow of new students, so this change isn't going to hurt us financially right now because the student load is going up, but it has the potential to be disastrous for us. I even had second thoughts about changing it, but then it was just, when I realized what was wrong with the system, I just knew that it had to be changed because it wasn't having the results that I wanted. And like I said, that's why I'm making this video. You have to understand that more lessons is better, not because I want your money, but because it's better for you. You're getting more out of it. Okay? That's why we're talking about this. So that's what I have for you about the benefit of taking 52 lessons a year. We want to have as many lessons. We're talking about the most enthusiastic students, right? You want to have 52 lessons a year, or as close to that as you can, to get the full benefit of private lessons. If you have any questions about this, please feel free to ask in the comments below or in your next lesson, or better yet, ask me in an email so that I don't waste your lesson time talking about this. Okay? Yeah, because I know a lot of you would rather not do email, and I'm not saying absolutely not do this in the lesson. We can talk about this in the lesson if you want, but I prefer to spend that time answering your answering your question in the email so that we have more time to talk trumpet in the lesson, right? All right, so that's what I have for you. God bless you guys. See you either in your next lesson or on the next video. Thanks for hanging out.